Okay, so welcome everybody to our December TBM forum. We are excited to have this kind of finish off the year. It's hard to believe that we started this forum last March, and the size has grown, and we've had some phenomenal speakers over the last year. First off, just let everyone know as a reminder that you are all on mute. We do that on purpose. But when we get to Q&A, you do have the option to raise your hand if you want to go off of mute and you want to ask our speakers any questions that you may have. That's the time to do it. In regards to the speakers, we have two great speakers today. We have Shana from Children's Health, and we also have Wesley Eugene. And I think you're going to really love the content that they're going to share. They've been doing TBM for a while now. And so they're going to be able to share with you, kind of not only their learnings, but probably share with you some of the pitfalls to avoid as you're thinking about either going on TBM or even if you've been on the journey yourself. There's obviously a lot of pitfalls that we kind of run into, and hopefully they'll be able to share with you some best practices. We do have all of our past videos and even the PowerPoint slides. We do have them now loaded. You can actually access them off of this URL here, or if you go to YouTube and you just type in advocate, they can also show up on YouTube. But feel free, we have every single of our past forums on there, and then along with the PowerPoint deck. If you can't find anything, feel free to reach out to me, Pietro, and I'll be able to provide you the content or even the link directly to the video. What we will do for Q&A is at the end of each presentation, it's about 20 minutes. There's a couple ways that you can ask a question. Option one is you can raise your hand, and I will go in there and unmute you. And option number two is there's a Q&A box. You can type in your question there. Or the third option is you can just type in your question in the chat box. But we do prefer you either raising your hand or submitting your question in the Q&A box. And you can do that anytime that you want. So thank you so much for both the presenters. And I will now hand this over to Shana, and she will share with you her content.
Thank you, Tim. Technical difficulties here. Thank you, Tim. My name is Jana Berger. Can everyone see my screen?
No,
Can you see it?
not yet.
Okay. How about now?
Try to unshare and share again.
Okay.
And then again, as a reminder, you're all on mute, so you don't have to worry about putting yourself on mute.
Sorry about that.
No worries.
Screen. Share.
If you want to, I'm happy to show. I think it's going to come up. There you go. Yep, it's coming up, my friend.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
You see your desktop. Perfect. Awesome.
That's why I do the numbers in IT and not the actual work on IT. So my name is Shana Berger. I'm the Senior Director of Technology Business Management here at Children's Health. I've been here for 16 years, and I can honestly say the last 2 years of being on the TBM journey has probably been the most exciting for me. A little about Children's Health. We've been around more than 100 years. Our mission is to make life better for children. We live that mission daily. Children's Health is the leading pediatric care system in North Texas. We have the second busiest ERs in the nation. I think right now, with the flu season and RSV season, I think our daily census in the ED is running over 550 a day. So that's quite a burden on our staff and everyone taking care of our kiddos here. one thing I think that drove us to TBM is the fact that we are taking care of children, and the model for healthcare is changing. The way we're reimbursed against fixed fee versus at-risk model, and people having a choice of where they go to get their care. Let's see, we have over 811,000 patient encounters per year. These are 2018 numbers. We employ over 7,600 employees. We have $37 million in charity care that we deliver. And then we have several different sites. We have our main hospital here that has 490 beds. We have a hospital in Plano with 72 beds. We have a specialty center, vet hospital with 39 beds. And then as you can see, just 23 specialty centers, imaging centers, 50 plus pediatric specialty and subspecialty programs, and a transplant program here at Children's. So with that, I'll get into our journey to TBM. So we started off with, we had a new CFO who wanted us to centralize our budget, which was a great idea, kind of painstaking, but we looked into those silos and found a lot of technical debt that was unknown to us until we received all the data. So that was quite enlightening to me and the CTO on where things are maybe hiding or things that may have been bought without us knowing it, and things that we had put into service. We had been using spreadsheets to track cost and renewals. That was getting too cumbersome. It wasn't being an effective use of our time. As many of you know, with the IT budget, I'm sure in your organization, it's the biggest one as well. And the biggest budget is the first to ask to be cut. So with that, the lack of detail to your budget, we were just having to take a swag off the number and not really know where we were going to cut it from. Just know that at the end of the year, we had to be down by $5 million or $10 million, whatever the request was from finance. So what we've seen with TBM and using this planning module is that now we have better details so that when they come back to us and ask us where do we want to take it from, we can specifically go to line items and say, this is exactly what line item we want to reduce, and this is why we're reducing it. And we're more able to take that risk, fully knowing that we will meet that requirement. Sometimes IT has been seen as a barrier in our organization to acquiring software, and that's why they go out and buy it themselves and buy it from vendors that tell them they don't need IT to install it, they just need to plug it in, and which leads to a lot of back re-engineering stuff that is bought at conferences, and then we need to put it into place. So leads to some extra budget dollars that we weren't preparing for. So our vision when we started this journey was to improve budget transparency and confidence with our business partners and with our finance leaders and our executive leaders of the hospital. We wanted to be able to align our application costs with investments to support our business outcomes. We wanted to validate redundancies in our application portfolio and reduce those. And we wanted to be seen as a strategic partner, a trusted service broker to all of our departments, just for them to know that they could come to us and we would give them the best advice. If they gave us the problem that they had at hand, that we would go out and work the solution and bring it back to them. We feel that the TBM solution helps us drive shared accountability of the IT costs with the business units instead of it all being, it's an IT problem. I would say I titled this Things to Know Before You Go. These are some things that we didn't really know on our onset to implementing, which was last summer. So we've been probably like a year and a half now. Executive support is crucial to success. Knowing your data owners, being able to socialize and get support from all the areas in IT that you're going to be needing data requests from. Get that early, get it often, and just keep them informed, because we found that we were asking for data Well, everyone has projects that they're working on. So when we're asking for data, we're competing with other projects, but we want to get this off the ground and know that you're going to go back once you put your data in. You're going to see something you missed and probably going back to those same people saying, oh, can you add this one field? So socialize and get support. Another thing that was very crucial for us is to explain that our tool, Apptio, that we're using for the TBM journey was in no way a replacement for any system in finance. Once again, that goes to redundancy. It would kind of defeat the purpose of the redundancy if we were adding just another finance system. So Apptio simply ingests the data from those systems and allows us to cost it out to a more user-friendly knowledge base for our IT end users. Other stakeholders that we partnered with were to educate direct reports and our finance partners to gain their support moving forward. We had great support from our finance partners. One actually even went with us to take the executive TBM class. So that was showing great support from our leadership in finance that they believed in what we were doing and wanted us to continue and be able to show back that we were being transparent. They had seen us prove it with our spreadsheets, but now know that we can prove it with the tool at hand. As far as community, connecting with others like a TBM conference or just in your local user groups has been invaluable to me. Across industries, we seem to all face the same problems, and sometimes it's problems that someone has a quick fix for, or sometimes it's problems that someone's like, well, it's not really that big of a deal when you look at the big picture. Go focus on some other quick wins and then come back to that later. So that's the way community has worked for me, and it's been great to meet everybody at TBM conferences and just around Dallas, just through other user groups. Partnership and support activities. Once again, I get into who all we had to knock on the doors for to help make this a success for us. Finance was number one. So in our first executive meetings that we had a finance director and our SVP of finance with us in those meetings so that they were fully aware of what we were trying to do and not thinking that we were trying to reproduce Strata or N4, which is what we use for our finance reporting. When I got to the data gathering, these are all the groups. So most of them are in our IT operations group, but some of them sit outside of our IT group. So it's not only acknowledging the ones that kind of are in your purview or at least in your division, but then having to go outside your division and making some negotiations with some other departments to get what you need and explaining how important it is that you get this information for it to be a success for the whole enterprise. Data readiness, the requirements were iterative. We would load data, see how it looked in the system, and then it would we'd say, oh, it'd be great if we had this field, or we use this other one, and let's edit this out. So it was a lot of iterations. So once again, going back to those partners, but going back to them with the story of what they're helping us do was critical to our success. And now on to our current state. We completed our Apptio-assisted implementation for IT planning and cost transparency. We're currently reviewing the data and testing for reasonability, confirming the application purpose and department of use, and also defining that business relationship manager role that's responsible for meeting with departments to review consumption of IT resources, project time, dollars, and applications. What we want to do with this role is to make sure that we're giving everybody the fair amount of time and attention. We have mission-based programs such as behavioral health those are just mission-based, critical to our community, And then we have certain programs like cardiology that are huge in our organization that help keep our organization going. We want to make sure we're giving each one the time that they need to be successful and meet the strategy of the organization. And with Aptio, it's allowing us to line out those dollars and have those conversations based on fact, not just assumptions on who's using what. With our different market leaders, it has helped let them know what their overhead costs. When they get that line item that says IT overhead, we can now tell them what's in that number. And now they can make that decision. Do they need to paint the walls or do they need this new system? It's down to the basics of that sometimes when we get to our market leaders. And that is all I had.
Outstanding. Great. So we do have a couple questions for you. I'll kick it off. And again, feel free if you want to ask questions, go use the QA box or raise your hand and I will unmute you. So the first question is, you talk about getting sponsorship, executive sponsorship. Why was that so critical for you at Children's Health?
It was critical. I think every project should have, just coming from the background as IT projects, having that sponsorship to allow you to have the time to dedicate, because we put this together. It was myself and our CTO were probably the main, we were the main players in implementing this, and having that sponsorship to be able to put some things aside to know that putting all our efforts towards this journey and getting us to a certain point was going to be successful for the organization. And then also having some of those conversations at the top with the CFO, letting them know that we weren't recreating the wheel and this was something that was going to produce a product different than anything that Strata or N4 could produce for him.
Okay, great. The next one, and we all hear this, I've heard this for the last 12 years, and it always comes up, but in regards to, data, we always talk about good, better, and best. How did you manage, how did you manage, the data issues initially, and, how did you continually look at cleaning up your data?
Initially, we got the first drops of data and worked to get them in the system. And it was very apparent at that time that we were going to have some shortcomings on some of the data. We weren't going to have everything we wished for from the sources that we wished for without a lot of re-engineering on their part. So I think a lot of time, well, not a lot of times, but in a few cases, we were able to go back and ask the ETO to rerun some reports, add some different things, but then in other cases, it just wasn't a capability of the system that we were getting the data from. And in that case, you just have to either kind of be satisfied with it or wait until they could have some more time to figure out a way to get you that data. Okay. But all the data we got was better than what we had, for one, and looking through it and getting iterations of it. Every iteration was a better view and gave you more ideas about how you could use it in the future and how you could use it to make the value of the business more apparent to everyone.
Okay. Great. Question from the audience. How did you get not only your IT folks, but even your business partners, how did you get them to trust maybe the reports out of Aptio or just the data that now you're sharing with them? Because now you're providing them these new views, right? They're so used to having that finance view, but now you're showing these additional views that they're not used to. So how were you able to get that comfort level with not only IT, but with the business looking at these new views and reports that you're getting out of Aptio?
Well, we are just getting started on that road. So we haven't had that much experience with it. Our goal in that is that we do have some key reports that we use to kind of check our figures in Aptio. So we will take those along with us, and actually our finance partners have quarterly business reviews, and so they've agreed to let us kind of marry up with those in the beginning so that they're there to kind of support the numbers that we are presenting and give us that thumbs up and nod to the business unions that this is the wave of the future, that we need to know all of this information, not just our general ledger balance sheet information. We need to know project time spent, where we're going, how many applications we have. Are there applications we can sunset, or do you want a new application? Does the one you have get you to 90%? And will that suffice without spending $5 million more on one that gets you just 10% more? So I think some will have a learning curve, but so far people we've introduced it to are very excited about it.
All right.
And our direct team as well.
Yeah.
Our director team is very excited about it, and they're willing to carry that word forward. So I think that helps a lot.
Great. So here's another question from the audience. So at the exec level, what type of reports or out of the box reports are you looking to provide to them, or are you having to kind of create your own reports just at the exec layer?
So far, what we've looked at is more of just the canned reports that are on the cost reporting or cost transparency, the views of, they have, Apptio comes with some great reports that are out of the box. We haven't created any special ones yet. There's enough for us to show each business unit up to the VP level, what they've got under their purview of what they're watching, and drill down into it enough for them to see what they've got in their overhead. I'm sure we are just now starting a partnership actually to do more work on our incident of Apptio. So I'm sure it's just going to get better with time. But the out of the box reports can get you through a lot of meetings and deliver a lot of information that was never available before.
Outstanding. All right. Let's see, another question here. How closely are you aligned to the Anthem model? And did you have to make any operational changes or realignments to align to kind of the towers or the services? And I know you're more or less doing IT planning, but are you pretty much aligned to the Anthem model, or did you have to deviate away a little?
With the healthcare extension, we're still, that's where we are starting to really mature our model, is to align to that healthcare extension and move up the model. We have cost transparency installed as well. And so that's where we're showing most of our alignment. So up until we get to the services level, we will pretty much be aligned with the Anthem model. And then with the healthcare extension that the work council worked on all last year to come up with the 2.0 version, I think we're going to be good to go on that. Healthcare definitely has its specialties about it, special niches. So we will be aligned with the Anthem model.
Terrific. And I'll just add some flavor around. You had mentioned the extended taxonomy. So, just for the audience, last year at the TBM conference, the TBM Council decided to extend the taxonomy out to 5 core work groups. Public sector was one, manufacturing, retail, finance, but healthcare was another work group that they wanted to extend the taxonomy, not only at the towers layer, but also at the services layer. And then part of that is the ability to allow customers like Children's Health to be able to benchmark or compare themselves against other customers within their same industry. And then just recently, last month, the TBM, they extended the taxonomy out to cloud and agile. If you want more information about being part of that work group, reach out to me. I'm lucky to be part of the TBM steering committee. So reach out to me, and I'm happy to connect you with those work group leaders. We'll do one more question. I believe this is a live question. I think this is Curtis. I'm gonna allow you to talk, my friend. Go ahead. You should be able to talk now.
Yeah, I was just curious how the TBM office is set up to support the program.
Good question. Right now, it is set up with me. We are currently looking. We are going to actually do a model with advocates to do the care and feeding of the system, and then my next hire is business relationship managers to start taking the message out to the business. We don't have a lot of positions available, so like I said, when we did this project, it was mainly myself and our CTO pushing forward on this project the whole time. And we haven't expanded past that. We've kind of went several different directions of, do we get a financial analyst? Do we get a business relationships manager? Do we get an enterprise architect? It's taken us a while to kind of land on the direction we need to go, which was business relationships manager, and start building out those lines of communication to the hospital and their market leaders. And that's what we've decided to do to get the most getting our message out.
Okay, great. So you can go ahead and unshare, my friend, and we'll pass it over to Wes. And Curtis, thank you so much for raising your hand. We've been doing this for the full year, and you're one of the few that actually that has the courage to raise your hand. So thank you so much.
And just one more comment back to Tim on the council. I was on the council this last year, and the relationships you create are invaluable. So once again, a plug for community and getting involved with other people and collaborating with them throughout the year, and then meeting up at TBM Connect or meeting up in your own town. I've learned so much from that. So just another plug for that. So
Awesome.
Thank you all.
No, thank you.
Great job. All right.
Okay, do you have it?
Yep, we're gonna pass it over.
Okay, first question is, can everyone see my screen?
Yes. It's not the only one that can talk, so yes.
Awesome. So that was an amazing journey that we just went on with Shana and with Shana, excuse me. And one of the things that, first things first, I introduce myself. My name is Wesley Eugene. I go by Wes as well. It's just an accident of being born with two first names. If given a choice, most people choose Eugene. So I decided to help everyone out by shortening the first one to Wes. In any case, a little bit about me. Let me see if I can get this working right. Yeah, so just really quickly, what I'll do is go over a little bit about me, move into the topic and the approach that I want to take, and then really walk you all through some perspectives about how to drive and run a very effective, a highly effective TBM program. We'll drop down into a summary, and of course, Tim will have us in a good spot on the Q&A. So just a little bit about me. Currently, I'm an independent consultant and advisor within the TBM space, but most recently I wrapped up a consulting engagement with Anthem, where I helped drive the operational design, development, deployment of their program. They've got a great team over there. Prior to that, I worked as head of technology business management and IT services at Aflac, where I was responsible for not just technology business management as we understand it on this call today, but the disciplines of IT service management, technology business management, the integration of our software delivery lifecycle tools, which we call the IT tool chain management, as well as a governance capability that was very audit focused, called IT policy and controls. I've been in the industry over 20 years. I'm not going to get too exact on the numbers because it depresses me sometimes. But we'll go ahead and move into, for all the Gators on the phone, I did do my undergrad at University of Florida, so go Gators. And for all of you who just took a really deep sigh, but maybe you're part of the Arbin family, War Eagle. That's where I did my MBA. So a little bit about the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and why is this graphic even up on a conversation about TBM? This is one of my all-time favorite books, and one of the most influential books in the space of professional development and productivity. And Stephen Covey really crystallized some thoughts that I think are very, very relevant to running an effective TBM program, and then that's why I want to take you through a little bit about those 7 habits of highly effective people, or it's just what you see there on the screen. Be proactive, begin with the end in mind, putting first things first, thinking when to win, seeking first to understand, then to be understood. This is also helpful in personal relationships for all you married folks that may be listening in. Synergize, and then of course sharpen the saw. The interesting thing about this book, it's an oldie but goodie. It was published in '89, but it's sold over 25 million copies in over 40 languages, and it's one of the best-selling nonfiction business books of all time. Okay, so what happens, right? I feel that TBM is a disruptive evolution of ITFM and service management, and a lot of really steady principles we've known throughout the years. And it's really early yet. I think for all you folks who may be Agile practitioners, and you think about the origin story where they codified the Agile Manifesto on some cabin out in Utah somewhere, and always wanted to be part of a movement early on, TBM is it. It's our opportunity to put a fingerprint on something that's still somewhat early stages and really have an imprint on your career. The connection between TBM and the 7 habits is really interesting when I started to study this. So the first big idea, right, is being proactive. And the way Covey talks about it is that he talks about the fact that highly effective teams, people, organizations kind of go beyond what we know as the traditional stimulus response model. And what do I mean? I don't mean to get too scientific here, but basically, if you prick, I remember I'm a dad, and when my daughter had her first shot ever, I had the luxury of holding her, and she's looking at me, she's smiling, she's trusting, and then the needle goes in, her eyes open as big as saucers, and I think I lost some trust that day that I'll probably never get back. But that is an example of basic stimulus response. Something happens in your environment, you immediately react. What Covey tried to put forward here is this idea that there is a space between the stimulus and the response that we own. And that space is a space where we can choose our response to the stimulus. We can be response, as he put it, able to choose our responses. Now, what's in between that space is this idea of this circle of concern and circle of influence. I want to talk a little bit about that, how that applies to TBM. So personally, this has been one of the most powerful concepts from the 7 Habits. It's stayed with me since the first day I read it, and I've applied it in business and professionally. But ultimately, the circle of influence and circle of concern is really a single circle. And what it is you imagine this circle, right, of concern. Everything that you're worried about, everything that keeps you up at night, everything that's not quite going right. And then when you think about your circle of influence, is identifying those things within your circle of concern that you can actually change. And when you think about it from a TBM perspective, these are your levers, right? We always talk to our stakeholders about the levers they can use to move the needle, to drive down operational costs, to shift funds from run the business to change the business. When you're thinking about the practice of TBM, we also have levers that we can use, and those levers are pretty much what Covey talks about as your circle of influence. From a TBM perspective, there are always things that are happening in the organization that are outside of your control, but due to your proximity to the C-suite, you are concerned, you are worried about it. There may be a new reorg announced. There may be, something coming up from the leadership team saying, hey, you know what? We are going to go through a reduction in force. We're going to have to lose some headcount. There may be questions about business viability. Sales may be down. All of those things, while incredibly interesting and valid for you to be concerned about, if you're running an effective TBM program, you don't have the luxury of focusing on all of those things. You have to identify those levers. What can you do within those changing waters to move the needle? And that's where you see the items, labor analytics, sales, IT, TCO, user enablement, apparat here in the circle of influence. Those are things the TBMO can actually move, right? And so I'm going to follow this pattern over and over. You'll see on the bottom left in the TBM toolbox. These are just different tools and or practices you can apply immediately to help you be proactive and manage within the circle of influence versus circle of concern. The next big idea, right, is this habit to begin with the end in mind. And ultimately, this, from Covey's perspective, was all about being a visionary, understanding, having a vision of where you want to go, what the destination is before you begin the journey. Now, I know, because I've had conversations with lots of you at conference and in between, sometimes the journey starts and it's like, holy moly, I have no idea where we're going to go. Or worse yet, it's like, here's where you're going to go and you've got no resources for the journey. So I get it, but it's really, really important to have a picture of what that is, have a vision of what that is. And there's this concept Covey talks about dual creation. Everything's created twice. Everything starts out as an idea or a blueprint, if you will, and then ultimately it becomes something physical, like the building you may be sitting in now. How this applies to TBM is really an effective TBM program is always going to keep the realization of business value planned or targeted in the forefront, right? And so when you look in the toolbox of things, how does this show up? So Wes, this is really cool. It's kind of airy-fairy. How does this get practical? That's in the toolbox. You're looking at your vision statement, your mission statement, your use cases, and your roadmap, right? These are some of the things you'd put in that toolbox to help you really crystallize what the end looks like so that you can have a successful journey. Habit 3 goes into putting first things first. And I apologize for the pace of this, but this is going to be forever memorialized thanks to Tim. And so you'll be able to review this, rewind, pause, all of that good stuff. But putting first things first, the big idea from Covey here is highly effective people, right, and organizations, they figure out how to manage their time according to prioritized values, plans, and tasks. And I'd encourage everyone on this call to take a look at the graphic here on the right. You've got this, basically it's a time utilization matrix, right? You've got on the top right, those things that are important and not urgent, the top, and in opposite that on the bottom left, those things that are not important and urgent, right? And just understanding the way this is set up, it's an interesting exercise to take your TBM program through. An effective TBMO is going to ensure that its time is regularly used in quadrant 2. So remember, Two had those things that were not urgent but very important. In other words, the activities here are activities that are very easy to postpone and deprioritize. Those are things that are important, but you say, we'll come back to that tomorrow. And if you're going to be a highly effective TBMO, what I'm encouraging you to do is do more of those things intentionally. Carve out space and time for those those non-urgent but very important activities, like the planning, like understanding those use cases, like really understanding your stakeholders. We're going to get a little more into that. When it comes to the top left quadrant with what things that are important and urgent, you know what? I'm going to say something that sounds a little controversial, but I say don't worry about this. Why? Because they take care of themselves. They're the top emails with the little red exclamation points that are in your inbox every day. They're the reason why your manager is standing at your desk. They're the reason why somebody called you. So these things are always going to be in front of you. You really don't have to put energy into managing any of your activities in this quadrant. Do less of the things that are not important but urgent. So, and we'll talk a little bit more about this, but ultimately, these could be activities that, saying not important is maybe a little harsh, but they're very routine activities. They don't necessarily move the needle, but if you stop doing it for a month or two, it'll show up somewhere. You want to do less of that, and you want to try to stop as much as you have going on in the bottom right quadrant of things that are not important and not urgent, right? And that's where working with someone within your organization, like Shana just talked about, having that business relationship manager will really help out. In the toolbox, again, I'd recommend everyone take their team through an assessment of how you're using your time. And as a TBM office, I'm going to say something else that might be a little controversial. You might even consider logging your time. Like, do something that captures how you're spending your time and where you're spending your time in an objective way so that you can analyze that later. Your operating model matters here. So you see down here in the toolbox, I've got TBM as a service. The reason why I have that there is because you may find things that are urgent, but not, they're not going to set the world on fire. Those may be some of those monthly operational routine tasks that make sense to give to a partner and say, you know what? I don't want to think about this anymore. I want to put this on autopilot and just keep moving while I'm focusing my energy in quadrant 2, right? So the fourth habit is think win-win. Again, Covey puts it out here that highly effective people, teams, and orgs apply win-win thinking to drive value, right? And so, like, when we're thinking about what that means and how that shows up from a TBM perspective, what I propose to all of you is that it's critical that every TBM program take the time to really identify all your key stakeholders and their WIFMs. So if you're not sure what a WIFM is, I'll break the acronym down for you. What's in it for me, right? It is so critical that you identify that and do that intentionally and openly. The reason why you see the graphic here of the TBM charter is because knowing those stakeholders and identifying those WIFMs are going to be critical to how that charter is actually produced. Because ultimately, especially for your data stakeholders, Shana talked about this, but I hear this all the time in community as well. Folks are like, well, I just can't get the right data. Oh, somebody doesn't want to give it to me. They think I'm coming after their job. Like, there are 1,000,001 refrains around data. And what I've got to ask you is to be introspective right now and ask yourself, is your relationship with those data stakeholders a give me relationship where every time you show up, you're like, I need this, I need this, I need this, give me, give me, give me, and they're not seeing anything in return. That data partner could be your PPM office. It could be your agile, your agility leaders in the organization. It can be your service management folks. It really doesn't matter at the end of the day. The key thing is to identify how will you provide value to those data stakeholders directly as a result of their engagement with you. Because if you don't give them something tangible, then why should they ever want to engage? Why should they want to partner? Okay, I'll get off the soapbox. Think win-win. But let's move to habit 5, right? Seek first to understand, then to be understood. And at first glance, you can say, well, we just kind of talked about how important it is to seek that win-win. How is this different? Well, what Covey emphasizes here is empathic listening, right? Like really digging in deep to understand your environment, your stakeholders, and everyone. And how does this look like from a TBM perspective? If we had Covey and Todd Tucker having a conversation, what would they say about this habit here? And I suspect that the conversation would go a little something like this, where in order to be an effective TBMO, you have to be a listening organization. And that means, from a TBM perspective, understanding the company's business and the key stakeholder needs. And so one of the things you see pictured here is a journey map. It's just one of many tools where you can codify listening. So, one of those principles of empathic listening is sometimes actually repeating the words that were said to you so that you can validate that the other person's message came across. Well, a picture's worth 1,000 words. Why not use a journey map and say, you know what, for our IT operations management team, right? This is their day-to-day. This is what their journey in a day looks like. Here are their different interactions and engagements. And here's how TBM can fit into this. And identify those points and then map it out for them. So you codify those with them that we just talked about into a working document. And ultimately, you've seen the toolbox, business strategy, OCM strategy. If you missed out on Tim's OCM presentation at conference, I feel sorry for you. That was a miss. Your career probably won't recover. But the good news is Tim is still around. And so you could reach out to him to get his insights on OCM. It was very, very powerful. And then I would also say, thinking about TBM adoption, one of the practices I'd recommend is use design thinking. And the reason why I'm putting design thinking out here is because one of the principles of design thinking is focusing on the user experience. And so again, going back to those stakeholders, but not just the stakeholders, but everyone that should be impacted or leveraging the principles of TBM in any way or fashion in your organization, what is their user experience supposed to be like? Anything from something as trite as logging into the solution, or something as interesting as harvesting insights. What should that look like for them? So habit 6, synergize, right? So really quickly, this is all about teamwork and creative cooperation. From Covey perspective, how it applies to TBM is, I'm going to drop the friendly tone here, and I'm just going to tell you exactly how I feel about this. If you're not an agile TBM program, you are setting yourself up for failure. I'll repeat myself. If you're not an agile TBM program, you are setting yourself up for critical failure. There is no more effective methodology for deep collaboration and value-driven teamwork than adopting agile practices. And I'm not pushing Scrum versus Kanban versus Lean IT. It doesn't really matter. Use any of them. Use all of them. Use a subset of them. But the thing to recognize about this whole framework is that it is designed for what? It's designed for change. And being in the TBM vertical, you are in a space within technology that's having to deal with change on the most dramatic and disruptive level I've seen since the introduction of Agile itself. So please do yourself a favor and adopt that. Finally, sharpen the saw. Okay, this is all about continuous improvement, and highly effective people, teams, and orgs are obsessed, right, with continuous improvement. What I will say about how this applies to TBM is that you have to have a TBMO that is obsessed with continuous improvement. And the way I categorize that is just to say this, right? I know that everyone prioritizes or feels passionately about continuous improvement. That's what drives people to conference and to user groups, that drives activity on community. So we're all thinking about it. But how do you take action on it? Again, look at the toolbox. Apply the principles of Lean IT. Use iterative team retrospectives. So after a cycle, whether your cycle is a bi-weekly cycle or you're using a monthly cycle that ties in with your month-end processes, stop, pause, smell the roses, figure out what's working, what's not working. TBMO 360s. So here's the thing. Most TBMOs are team-based, okay? You're not going to have an effective team if you can't be honest with one another about what's going well and what's not going well, what are the strengths and weaknesses of everyone. You need to do this work. It's not just airy-fairy woo-woo stuff. This is critical. TBM Value Stakeholder Survey. Survey your stakeholders. Understand how they're seeing you, because the mirror you're looking at is a funhouse mirror. It's not working right. You've got to have an objective analysis of how you're being perceived. Automation and TBM as a service. Again, if you're really focused on continuous improvement, what you're doing is you're going through a cycle where you're figuring out how you can do more by using less. And on that journey, you're going to identify things that you can go ahead and automate. Please partner with your RPA folks, partner with your folks who are using intelligent business process management tools, and figure out how you can automate as much of this as possible. If you app your customer, you've got data link, use it, right? And then TBM as a service, again, those things that you can't automate but still fall into quadrant 3, right, that we talked about a little bit earlier, think about outsourcing those to a valued partner that'll go ahead and take some of that routine, monotonous work away from you, and you can focus on high-value activity. So at a glance, recap really quick, in order to be highly effective programs are going to do this, right? In order to be proactive, you're going to focus on items in your circle of influence. In order to begin with the end in mind, you're going to keep business value realization at the forefront. In order to put first things first, you're going to assess where you're spending your time and move things to where you intentionally prioritize high-value, non-urgent activities. In order to think win-win, you're going to identify those with-ems. In order to seek first to understand, then to be understood, you're going to listen to the organization using some of those tools we talked about. In order to synergize, you're going to apply agile practices, okay? And then ultimately, to sharpen the saw, you will be obsessed with continuous improvement and leveraging lean IT practices to drive your journey forward. That's what I have.
We got questions?
Yep. Shoot.
I wish you were passionate about this one. I mean, that'll come over time, hopefully, with you. Question from the audience from Kevin. In regards to the habit for win-win, have you used in the past, or have you seen people use a formal organizational change framework or methodology, AdCard, for example, to kind of help support the people on the process side of change?
Yep, absolutely. So what we did with that, I've seen this actually applied this at Aflac, where we used AdCard, and we partnered with OCM professionals that are outside of the TBMO to apply that formally in order to drive change around our IT planning processes.
Great, awesome. Okay, another question here, kind of based off of your experience. You talked about data earlier, and again, I like to harp on that a little bit. People are always nervous about, I don't think my data's clean. Someone that's thinking about adopting TBM, what advice do you have for them in regards to about them being nervous about how bad their data is? Like what's kind of your 2 or 3 things you would say to someone that's thinking about doing TBM, that's so concerned about their data being dirty? Like, what's your advice?
Yeah. So the first thing is, number one, you're not alone. We're all there. We're all there. That's the first thing I understand. Second thing I'd say is go ahead and get started. And that get started doesn't mean you deploy some fancy tool. It can mean just getting together with the big data professionals in your organization and working on applying some principles. Apply the standards of data governance, good data governance. Go ahead and start applying that to IT operations. Because what I find is that for whatever reason, most companies are not applying that to their organizations. And so I would go with that.
Perfect. All right, last question. I know some people have to leave. The final question is, you're on the path. You kind of have TBM up and running, cost transparency. You're kind of you have the data in the solution, but now we start talking about service owners. What about organizational change for service owners? How important is that?
It's critical if they want to remain gainfully employed. What's going to happen is that their services we're all on this digital journey. Things that were rendered one way before are completely changing. And so they have to really fully adopt those practices. And again, if you don't have the knowledge, partner with someone in your organization that does.
Okay, outstanding. Well, great. Thanks, Wes, and Shana, thank you again. This is a great way to finish out the year of 2019. We're excited to come back in 2020. We're actually going to take this on the road. If you think about hosting us, we're happy to come to your area and have the TBM forum. Again, this will be up on that site that I showed earlier. I'll send you out a survey result. If you wouldn't mind filling out that survey, that would be awesome. And if I don't talk to each one of you, have a terrific holiday season, and we will talk to you next year. Take care, everyone. Bye.